Hello everyone, I'm the Bennett Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. This video is actually a special release. Even though it's a deck tech video, it's not an episode of The Brewery. That's because this video is a special request from fellow content creator HermitDruid. It'll aim to explain in great detail how to pilot his Ishai and Jeska cEDH deck. You can find its deck list and primer on Mox Field down in the description. That primer was edited and organized by Ken from cEDH. You can also find links to their content down in the description. Definitely check out their stuff. As for me, if you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. The best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. For just $1, patrons get early access to certain videos on YouTube. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Leave it to HermitDruid to wake up and always choose violence. If you've been following him on Twitter and TikTok, then you would have undoubtedly seen his memes affirming this and the importance of always choosing violence. If his Sakashima Kodama Karuga deck weren't an indicator to that, then Ishai Jeska definitely is. Voltron is almost exclusively considered a casual archetype, but this list takes Voltron to competitive EDH tables. Like any Voltron deck, it's a combat-focused deck that aims to knock out players one by one with combat damage. There aren't many huge beaters in cEDH, so having a huge flyer on the board that only gets larger the more your opponents play also adds a political dimension to piloting the deck, especially since it has the potential to take out the second biggest threat at the table, because having player removal on the board technically makes you the biggest threat at the table. Literally as well, because Ishai gets crazy big. Since most of the cards in the deck are obvious includes, before we get to them, it's important to understand the mentality behind the deck. As is known, Voltron decks have the potential to come in second place due to the king making. That's why we have to first understand the deck's philosophy and how it's actually piloted in order to not have that happen and make yourself the king, or king and queen in this case, since Jeska is Ishai's partner after all. The most important thing of all is to avoid sacrificing card quality. Keep in mind that your opponents make Ishai grow. The more spells they cast, the more free mana rocks they play, interaction, counterspell wars, etc., the bigger Ishai becomes. And quite quickly too, since most cEDH players play ground level low average mana curves. This means that instead of including cards to soup up Ishai, play cards to protect Ishai that can also be used to disrupt opponents. The first rule of this deck is that it only includes cards that have as many functions as possible. The more things it can do is better. That's why a card like cEDH is highly considered for the deck but ultimately excluded. cEDH has the potential to end the game right then and there so long as Ishai connects with enough damage. At 2 mana, it's also an amazing contender. However, that's all cEDH does, spread Ishai's love around. That being said, if you want to slot in cEDH, then definitely go for it. It's not a bad card in the slightest. It's simply that this list is too tight to fit it in, for the moment at least. The other important thing to keep in mind is that since the deck isn't black, the quality of tutoring isn't optimal. That's not to say there aren't any good tutors in red, white, blue, just that you can't really include any game-ending combos you want as plan B. So the deck prioritizes early card advantage. That way we're drawing into responses. Responses upon responses upon responses and or more card advantage. Again, this is to get Ishai out as early as possible while also having responses in hand to protect it. Fortunately, most free and cheap counterspells in cEDH don't hit creatures, so there is a high likelihood of Ishai successfully being cast. If not, we can counter that counterspell with some counter magic of our own, which is why we have to dig through the deck to always have them. It also explains the high interaction count in the list, which we'll soon see. The final important aspect of piloting this deck is just like any experienced fighter knows, pay close attention to what your opponents are doing. Threat assessment is of the utmost importance when piloting this deck, since you want to always take out the biggest threat first, and that's not the stacks player. But we'll see what to do against the potential matchups in a moment. Since there's many different archetypes in cEDH, I'm going to go over them one at a time later on. For now, let's see what other win cons the deck has, which is also part of why you have to see what you're up against. While you can definitely include classic red, white, blue combos like Bomberman and whatnot, this deck omits them because of the first rule of the deck's philosophy: avoid sacrificing card quality. You want your cards to do multiple things, and the salvagers don't do anything without the diamond. So while you can build your decks really however you want, try and include combos whose pieces are good on their own, especially in a deck like this one that aims to maximize all of its slots. This is why the deck is running the Breach Freeze combo with the diamond instead of the salvagers. The great thing about the diamond is that it can also be used to accelerate the deck, since it can potentially provide a turn 1 or turn 2 Ishai, as well as some mana boost later on. This combo also works with Lotus Petal instead. Again, this mana rock is good on its own but can provide gas for the combo. This plan B can help you by milling out opponents if you can't beat them with Ishai for whatever reason. However, each of these pieces work well on their own, which is why this combo is better for this particular deck than Bomberman or any other A plus B combo viable in red, white, blue. Especially since this is easier to pull off thanks to Spellseeker. Notice how not only does this card help assemble the Breach Freeze combo, but it's also good on its own to tutor up any interaction or card advantage in the deck per rule number 1. So let's see the lines they need to pull it off. When Spellseeker enters the battlefield, look for Ephemerate, then cast it targeting the Spellseeker. When Spellseeker returns to the battlefield, look for Enlightened Tutor or interaction if you already have it. At the beginning of your next upkeep, Ephemerate rebounds, once more blinking Spellseeker. This time, you look for Brain Freeze. However, if you looked for interaction before, then look for Enlightened Tutor now. If you didn't, then look for Brain Freeze. Maintaining priority during your upkeep, cast Enlightened Tutor to top deck Underworld Breach from your library. That way you can draw into it during your upcoming draw step. Cast it now to be able to escape Enlightened Tutor, top decking Lion's Eye Diamond. Then target yourself with Brain Freeze, milling the diamond. Then escape Lion's Eye Diamond. Now you're all set up for the Breach Freeze combo. The other Spellseeker setup has us using Jeska for the win, so let's see how that works. Use Spellseeker to find Ephemerate, then cast it to blink Spellseeker. When it returns, get Final Fortune. Cast it to take an extra turn. In your next upkeep, Ephemerate blinks Spellseeker. You now look for Enlightened Tutor. Maintaining priority during your upkeep, cast it to top deck Underworld Breach so you can draw it in your upcoming draw step. Then cast it in your main phase. Now escape Ephemerate to blink Spellseeker and look for Brain Freeze. Now escape Enlightened Tutor to top deck Lion's Eye Diamond. Then cast Brain Freeze targeting yourself. It's going to resolve its effect 6 times, filling the graveyard to fuel Breach. Now escape Lion's Eye Diamond. Activate it for triple blue. Escape it again and sacrifice it again for 3 more blue mana. Now you're going to escape Brain Freeze thrice, targeting yourself with each copy. Now escape Lion's Eye Diamond. Sacrifice it for 3 more blue mana, then do it all over again for 3 red mana. Then cast or escape Stormkiln Artist. Now escape Brain Freeze once more, this time targeting an opponent with all 15 copies. This will trigger the dwarf, creating 15 treasure tokens. Now sacrifice 3 of those treasures, each for blue, to once more escape Brain Freeze, targeting an opponent. Holding priority on the original one, cast Flusterstorm, targeting it. In fact, target all of Brain Freeze's copy with each Flusterstorm copy. This will trigger the dwarf, creating 33 additional treasure tokens. Once you're here, you can repeat this process of escaping Brain Freeze and then escaping Flusterstorm in response to counter it and each copy until you have over 80 treasure tokens. Now you can use those treasures to cast Jeska as many times as necessary to clear off the table. However, if you love that flavor, if any opponent were to have 7 or more cards in their hand, you can escape Jeska's Will indefinitely many times from your graveyard to get the red mana needed to cast Jeska indefinitely many times from the command zone. Alright, now that we know we can either win by having Jeska triple Ishai's power when going on the attack or by the Breach Freeze combo, let's see the rest of the deck. The primer does an excellent job of going over each and every card in exquisite detail. However, since this video is meant to accompany the primer, I will organize the cards into key categories so that you get a general idea of why they're included and their purpose per the main rule of piloting building this deck, which is rule number 1, avoid sacrificing card quality. So let's start off with the other Planeswalkers in the deck, since Planeswalkers are the quintessential modular cards in Magic. Teferi, Master of Time is busted here and serves as an example to include cards that do multiple things. Not only can you activate him each turn, but his +1 is a loot effect, providing card advantage and filling the graveyard for Underworld Breach. His -3 can phase out any potential blocker such as Crom, a very common cEDH partner. His ultimate is hardly achieved, but if you're able to, it's essentially game over. However, that's not the main reason for running Teferi. Narset, Potter of Veils is back in the deck since Hull Breacher got banned. She might not have flash, but is a great stacks piece to keep wheeled decks at bay, as well as controlling how many cards our opponents are going to be drawing. Her activated ability filters a card from the top 4, which is yet some more card advantage. Speaking of stacks, Aven Mind Sensor is included to prevent opponents tutoring for responses, their combo pieces, and to nerf their fetch lands. We can't run Opposition Agent, but Aven Mind Sensor is a close second, especially for white. Drannith Magistrate and Grand Abolisher are some more great white stacks pieces. The Magistrate shuts down graveyard decks and prevents opponents from casting their commanders if they're still in the command zone. The Abolisher protects our turn against opponent's interaction, which is super important since we can only attack during our turn and we can only achieve the Breach Freeze combo during our main phase too. Casting Silence during our upkeep is another great way to protect our turn from interaction. But as per rule number 1 of the deck, Silence can also be used to shut down any opponent you suspect is going to combo off. So this is also key to rule number 3 of the deck, which is optimizing your threat assessment. That's why Silence is such a great card here. Esper Sentinel, Mystic Grimoire, and Rhystic Study are more ubiquitous in terms of stacks pieces. The key thing about the first two is costing only 1 mana to cast, since the deck has an incredibly low average mana curve. You can't really rely on Moxfield for that, since realistically the deck casts a lot of spells for free, bypassing their printed mana cost, but we'll see those in a bit. Flame Scroll Celebrant is one of those cards that fall into the meta aspect of building the deck that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. If your meta isn't full of decks with activated abilities, then this hate bear might not be that good. That being said, it's an incidental hate bear at most, and another silence effect at best thanks to its backside. Revel in Silence is yet another way to protect our turn as well as prevent an opponent from comboing off during theirs at the cost of just 1 additional white mana. Notice again, card quality. This card can do 2 things and do them well. As for responses, Gilded Drake can take away an opponent's best creature for just 2 mana. Yes, they do gain a potential blocker for Ishai, but the deck has plenty of responses for that and for any other blocker or potential blocker they might have. Plus, we keep their creatures. Some of the responses being Snap, Swords to Plowshares, and Unsubstantiate. Snap is one of those spells I mentioned that are essentially free. Since it untaps 2 lands when you cast it, it essentially pays for itself. Source is a no-brainer since life gain doesn't matter when you're getting hit with 21 commander damage. Unsubstantiate is another one of those modal spells at the core of the philosophy of the deck. Not only can it bounce a potential blocker, but any spell as well, so it's almost like a counterspell in a way. Resculpt and You Come to a River are similar in that they have multiple functions too. Resculpt exiles an artifact or creature and, although they get a 4/4 for it, it doesn't fly and doesn't have reach, so it doesn't matter. You Come to a River is even better since it can bounce any non-land permanent, or it can make Ishai unblockable while also giving it an extra point of power just in case. +1 might not seem like much, but with Jeska out, it's definitely much more than that. Cyclonic Rift can also bounce any non-land permanent for 2 mana. However, overloading this can bounce the board of anything that can bother us, so that modality is very useful to say the least. Shadow Skull Smashing can get rid of some weenies or hate bears, but it is an incidental removal spell. Again, multi-use cards is the bread and butter of the deck. This is more often than not a land that could potentially enter untapped at the cost of 3 life, which isn't an issue for this deck, so it's basically another land unless we can burn something. As for the core of the deck's responses, it lies in the vast suite of counter magic. Delay, Dobbin's Veto, Fierce Guardianship, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Mana Drain, Mental Misstep, Miscast, Pact of Negation, Swan Song, and Muddle the Mixture. Again, notice how some of these can be cast for free, even though they have a steep casting cost, so the effective mana curve of this deck is much lower than what is displayed in Moxfield. That being said, one of the best counter spells in here is Muddle the Mixture, thanks to the Transmute. You can use this to get Underworld Breach, Draneth Magistrate, Grand Abolisher, etc. Such a great card here. Deflecting Swat up to a certain point is almost like another counterspell in the deck, since it can be used to redirect a counterspell but can also be used to redirect any spot removal used against Ishai, again for free. So don't rely too heavily on computer determined mana curves for this deck. As for the card advantage of the deck, Archmage Emeritus is insane. It makes our cantrips draw 1 more card, but it also draws us a ton of cards when we cast spells with Storm. Just be careful when having it in play when we combo off with Breach Freeze. You might have to bounce it or get rid of it first to not deck yourself. Speaking of cantrips, Brainstorm is another no-brainer, no pun intended, in the deck, but it also goes well with Brain Freeze. If you'd rather have those cards in the graveyard, top deck them before milling yourself with Brain Freeze. Gitaxian Probe, another excellent cantrip, is free to cast and can also give us information on an opponent's hand. Again, keep in mind the threat assessment. Best of all, you can also share this information in order to continue with the politics, which is still one major aspect of the deck. You Find Some Prisoners is an interesting cantrip since you're essentially drawing a card from an opponent's library. And not just that, but you choose their best card from amongst the top 3. This also lets you play a land, so you could be ramping for any land for just 2 red mana in red, no less. Its other option is great too since it blows up an artifact. Seagate Restoration, which is quite hefty to cast at 7 mana, is incidental card draw since it's used mostly as Seagate Reborn. Since its backside is a land that can enter untapped, it doesn't really take up a slot in the deck. Again, multiple options per card is a must. In any case, the best mass card draw spells in the deck are Time Twister, Wheel of Fortune, and Windfall, which are the deck's wheels. These are also a no-brainer in the format. And while Hull Breacher got Hull banned, they're still great at disrupting hands while filling ours. And as always, quite salt-inducing when cast while Knowledge Set is in play. However, the best card advantage is straight up tutelage. Intuition, Mystical Tutor, Merchant Scroll, and Gamble are the rest of the tutors of the deck. While the middle 2 are pretty straightforward, Gamble is potentially a game ender since you can use it to get Underworld Breach. If you don't discard it due to the effect, you can then escape Gamble as often as needed to get the rest of the combo pieces. Same for Intuition. The primer explains it best, so I'll just quote it here. the deck's most powerful tutor. Since we're often holding up mana, this can either be used to set up a win via Underworld Breach by choosing Seven's Reclamation, Underworld Breach, and Land's Eye Diamond, or find 3 relevant pieces of disruption. You'll most probably cast this during the end step before the turn. And look out for the opportunity to cast Intuition if you're the last player with the ability to stop an opponent's win attempt, by grabbing Fierce Guardianship or another free counterspell, Underworld Breach, and Seven's Reclamation, so your opponents will be forced to give you the counterspell, thus setting up a breach win. Again, politics at best. The final tutor effect in the deck is Ranger Captain of Eos. This is used to tutor for either Esper Sentinel or Ragavan. However, more important than that, once it's on the battlefield, you can sacrifice it for free at instant speed to get yet another silence effect on the deck. It's almost like tutoring for the Sentinel or Ragavan is an incidental bonus. Speaking of, Ragavan isn't the only mana accelerator in the deck. Naturally, Dockside Extortionist is here too. Not only is this Goblin Pirate amazing here, but it's also tutorable with Muddle the Mixture. However, the only combos in the deck revolve around Breach Freeze, so no Dockside combos here. That being said, getting a ton of treasure for just 2 mana is a good enough ritual anyways. Also, you can potentially get more treasures off of Dockside by bouncing it with your own removal spells if you're strapped for mana and need just that little bit of an extra boost. The rest of the mana rocks are also self-explanatory, so I won't get into much detail here. The deck aims to be as fast as possible, so these are the best rocks that HermitDruid has found while testing the deck. As for the lands, the deck's running all 9 fetch lands, all 3 shock lands, all 3 dual lands, Sea of Clouds, Training Center, Ancient Tomb, City of Brass, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Forbidden Orchard, Gemstone Caverns, Mana Confluence, Spire of Industry, Tarnished Citadel, and a singular basic island because Blood Moon is a thing. Again, the primer has a rundown of each card in the deck, so it's definitely worth it to check it out if you want a deeper explanation in greater detail over his choices for the deck up to how it currently is as of the making of this video. Alright, now that we know what's in the deck, let's go over what to expect in matchups. This will also help us determine how to mulligan, which I will discuss soon. Versus Ad Nos decks. Since these decks use their life totals as a resource, constantly hitting them with a huge flyer, this allows them digging too deep through their deck with ad nauseum, even if their curve is very low. These decks tend to win off resolving ad nauseum if they can also protect their combo pieces. However, they can't really outpace us if we're constantly applying the pressure. Keep in mind that with all the counter magic in the deck, you can also wait until they attempt it and then win the counterspell war to prevent ad nauseum from resolving. This is where the politics and threat assessment come in as well. You're not the only one wanting to prevent ad nauseum from resolving. Wait to see who has priority afterwards before spending your own resources to deal with it. Remember, opponents' counterspell wars really beef up Ishai. This is especially true against turbo ad nos since they can potentially outpace us. That's when you really have to pressure that player's life total, or making temporary friends to gang up on that player before they win the game quickly. As for mulligans against ad nos, keep early card advantage and interaction. Mulligan aggressively for turn 1 Mystic Remora, Esper Sentinel, or fast interaction. Don't be greedy. If you're able to stop ad nos with interaction first and then cast Ishai, do that. Versus Crom. Crom is a problem because it's a flyer that can block Ishai. It also has haste, so it can also attack Jeska if Ishai's tapped after an attack. So you need to wait until Ishai's at least 6/6 before attacking into the Crom player. Once you have both Jeska and Ishai, Crom will stay as a blocker since that's lethal commander damage. However, Crom provides card advantage, so either way you have to deal with it. So remove it once you're able to deal lethal commander damage to the player. As for mulligans against Crom, make sure you're able to get an ideal curve of turn 1 card draw or fast mana to get Ishai out quickly. Then by turn 3 be able to take out players. Versus stacks. Stack players are our friends. They slow down the game, making it easier for us to attack into opponents since we can save our responses to protect Ishai instead of disrupting combos or players storming off. Leaving them for last means that we might not even need our combo for the win. We can go with plan A, which is commander damage. If they have too many stacks pieces, overload Cyclonic Rift during your turn, protected with your own stacks effects. Mulligans against stacks is similar to the main way to pilot the deck. We want an early Ishai to take advantage of the stacks player, slowing down the rest of the table. Do keep interaction though for when it's time to take that player out, meaning that you don't need to do it early on. Versus midrange. This has the potential to be our worst matchup if we play poorly. That being said, this has the potential for being the most fun matchup of them all since they force us to make good decisions or lose. Their decks are balanced between interaction and card advantage, giving them plenty of ways to disrupt Ishai as well as our combos. So the best way to deal with them, besides not making any mistakes, is one-shotting them the moment we can. Make One Punch Man proud. As for mulligans, do so aggressively until you're able to get card advantage engines or fast mana to get out Ishai as early as possible. You need to outpace the mid-range player before they make it harder to take them out. And this concludes this deck tech video for HermitDruid's Jeska Ishai Voltron cEDH deck. If you're interested in the deck list and primer, you can find a link to it down in the description. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can also find links to his content as well as stacked EDH. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link, that also helps out the channel. I want to especially thank HermitDruid for sponsoring this video. Hopefully it's helped you all understand how to pilot his deck as well as slightly improve your competitive edge. And to everyone else, thanks for watching. I am the Medic Kirby, and happy brewing.